This chapter is on the socio-emotional development in early childhood. So by 3 years old, a child generally knows whether they are a boy or a girl. For many people, the terms gender and sex are interchangeable. This idea has become so common, particularly in Western societies, that it's rarely questioned. Yet biological sex and gender are different. Gender is not inherently connected to one's physical anatomy. Sex is biological and includes physical attributes like sex chromosomes, gonads, sex hormones, internal reproductive structures, and external genitalia. At birth, it is used to identify individuals as male or female. Gender, on the other hand, is far more complicated. Along with one's physical traits, it is the complex interrelationship between those traits and one's internal sense of self as a male or female or both, or neither, as well as one's outward presentations and behaviors related to that perception. Western culture has come to view gender as a binary concept, with two rigidly fixed options, male or female. When a child is born, a quick glance between legs determines the gender label that the child will carry for life. But even if gender is to be restricted to basic biology, a binary concept still fails to capture the rich variation observed. Rather than just two distinct boxes, biological gender occurs across a continuum of possibilities. This spectrum of anatomical variations by itself should be enough to disregard the simplistic notion of only two genders. But beyond anatomy, there are multiple domains defining gender. In turn, these domains can be independently characterized across a range of possibilities. Instead of the static binary model produced through a solely physical understanding of gender, a far more rich texture of biology, gender expression, and gender identity intersect in multi-dimensionally array of possibilities. Quite simply, the gender spectrum represents a more nuanced and ultimately truly authentic model of human gender. Gender is all around us. It's actually taught to us from the moment we're born. Gender expectations and messages bombard us constantly. Our upbringing, culture, peers, community, media, and religion are all some of the many influences that can shape our understanding of this core aspect of our identity. How you learned and interacted with gender as a young child directly influences how you view the world today. Gendered interaction between parent and child begin as soon as the sex of the baby is known. So gender is a socially constructed concept. Like other social constructs, gender is closely monitored by society. Practically everything in society is assigned a gender. Toys, colors, clothes, and behaviors are some of the more obvious examples. Through a combination of social conditioning and personal preference, by age 3, most children prefer activities and exhibit behaviors typically associated with their sex. Accepted social gender roles and expectations are so entrenched in our culture that most people cannot imagine any other way. As a result, individuals fitting neatly into these expectations rarely, if ever, question what gender really means. They've never had to, basically because the system has worked for them. So, gender diversity is a term that recognizes that many people's preferences and self expression fall outside commonly understood gender norms. Gender diversity is a normal part of human expression. It's documented across cultures and it's recorded in history. Non-binary gender diversity exists throughout the world. It's documented by countless historians and anthropologists. Some examples of living comfortably outside of typical male-female identities are found in every region of the globe. There's Two-Spirit Native Americans called the Kalabai and the Kalalai. They're of Indonesia, and the Hirai of India. They all represent more complex understanding of gender than the simplistic model that we see generally in Western culture. So what might be considered gender nonconformity in one period of history may become gender normative in another. So a person would only need to examine trends related to men wearing earrings or women sporting tattoos to quickly see the malleability of social expectations about gender. Even the seemingly intractable pink is for girls, blue is for boys, that notion is relatively new. While there is some debate about the reasons why they reversed, what is well documented is that until the 1950s, pink was seen as a more decided and stronger color, and thus more suitable for a boy, while blue was viewed more delicate and dainty, and was commonly worn by girls. Given the complexity of gender, it's not surprising that an increasing number of terms and phrases are developing to describe it. So here are a couple more terms that are used to describe. So gender identity is one's innermost concept of self as a male or female or both or neither, and how individuals perceive themselves and what they call themselves. One's gender can be the same or different than the sex assigned at birth. Individuals are conscious of this between the ages of 18 months and 3 years old. Most people develop a gender identity that matches their biological sex, but for some, their gender identity is different from their biological or assigned sex. And some of these individuals choose to socially, hormonally, and even surgically change their sex to more to match their gender identity. Gender roles. That's a set of rules or activities or expectations and behaviors that are assigned to females and males by our society. Our culture recognizes two basic gender roles, and that's masculine, which means having the qualities attributed to males, and feminine, which is having the qualities attributed to females. People who step out of their socially assigned gender roles are sometimes referred to as transgender. Other cultures have 3 or more gender roles. So transgender basically it's sometimes used as an umbrella term to describe anyone whose identity or behavior falls outside of the stereotypical gender norm. But more narrowly defined, it refers to an individual whose gender does not match their assigned birth gender. And being transgender does not imply any specific sexual orientation or attraction to people of a specific gender. So transgender people may additionally identify themselves as straight, gay, lesbian, or bisexual. So these are some of the different social theories of gender. We have the social role theory, which states that gender differences result from the contrasting roles of women and men. Then the psychoanalytic theory, which was developed by Sigmund Freud, states that the preschool child develops a sexual attraction to the opposite sex parent. So a girl or a daughter would be attracted to her father, and a boy or son would be attracted to his mother. And that's called the Oedipus and Electra complex. Then there's the social cognitive theory, which states that gender development occurs through observation and imitation. So now we're going to discuss parenting. Parents can play an important role in helping children regulate their emotions. And there's two different classifications of emotion coaching or emotion dismissing parents. And emotion coaching parents will generally monitor their child's emotions. They view them as opportunities for teaching and coach them in how to deal with emotions effectively. So if a child falls down and scrapes his knee, a parent might say, "Oh no, you fell down, but it doesn't look too bad. It probably only hurt a tiny bit." So there, the parent is acknowledging what the child just experienced and helping the child realize how the reaction should be, what the reaction should be for people in general. Then there's emotion dismissing parents, and these parents would view their role as to deny, ignore, or change a negative emotion that a child is experiencing. So in this case, if a child falls down and scrapes his knee, a parent might say something like, "You're okay, nothing happened." So that's kind of dismissing what actually just occurred and completely ignoring it, and it's putting the child's feelings, pushing them away, and it's denying them. So around early childhood, children are also developing morals. And basically moral development is the development of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors regarding rules and conventions about what people should and shouldn't do in their interactions with other people. So according to Freud, which is not backed by any research, and most of his ideas are not backed by research, but he states that children develop moral feelings in order to avoid punishment, in order to reduce anxiety, and in order to maintain parental affection. So Baumrind came up with 3 different parenting styles to describe how parents interact with their children. One of them is a permissive parenting style, and there's 2 types of permissive parenting styles. There's the neglectful and the indulgent. And those are kind of different. The permissive neglectful parents will place very few limits on their children. But at the same time, they will show very little warmth or emotional responsiveness to their children. And permissive indulgent parents are different in that there's the high level of warmth and responsiveness emotionally to their children, but they both permissive parents will place few limits or control on their children. Permissive indulgent parents will hug their children and show a very warm response, smile at them, make eye contact, while the neglectful ones won't do any of that. Authoritarian parents are highly controlling, and they show little warmth or emotional responsiveness to their children. And one way you can think of that is the word authoritarian has 2 R's in it. So you can think of it as rigid ruler. Those are the types of parents that are highly controlling and not going to give their children a hug, not going to smile at their children, and things like that. Then there's authoritative parents, and they set and enforce firm limits and they have a high level of warmth and high level of emotional responsiveness. So one way you can think of that is there's two T's in the word authoritative, and you can think of those parents as tender teachers. So authoritarian parents, they'll usually make arbitrary rules that don't really make that aren't really significant, and they'll expect unquestioned obedience from their children. Like basically, these types of parents will say, "Do as I say," and they won't give their children a reason why. They'll also punish transgressions, and they value obedience to authority. Authoritative parents, that they usually set high but realistic standards. They reason with their child. They enforce limits and encourage open communication and dependence. These types of parents, if they tell their child not to do something, they will usually give the child an explanation as to why they shouldn't do that. For example, if a child's running up and down the stairs and jumping off the trying to jump off the ledge, a parent might say, "Tommy, you shouldn't. Don't run up and down the stairs and don't hang off the ledge because you might fall down and hurt yourself, and then you'll probably be very sad and cry." So the parent is enforcing a limit, but also giving an explanation and communicating as to why the child shouldn't do a particular thing. Then the permissive parents will make essentially no rules or demands. The child can run up and down the stairs, jump off the roof. They'll allow children to make their own decisions and control their own behavior. So some of the reactions and outcomes to the different parenting styles. Now, these aren't always the case in every situation, but generally what they find is that when a parent is authoritative, a child will turn out to be more lively and happy. They'll be more self-confident, and they'll be able to regulate their emotions easier. They'll also develop better social skills and be able to interact with other people better. These types of children will turn out to have less rigid and gender stereotyped traits. Then authoritarian parenting, sometimes children will turn out to be anxious and withdrawn and not very socially adept. They'll have kind of an unhappy disposition, and they'll have poor reactions to frustration. Girls are particularly likely to give up, and boys become especially hostile in situations such as that require a lot of effort. At the same time, these children will do very well in school. Generally speaking, they do the best in school as compared to others, but studies may show that authoritative parenting is comparable. So the product of authoritarian parenting, the children are not likely to engage in antisocial activities like drug and alcohol abuse or vandalism and things like that. Might be because they're kind of afraid to. If they have a parent that's very rigid, it might even at times punish them severely. They might be scared to engage in those types of activities. Then you have the permissive parents, and those types of children generally turn out to have a poor regulation of their emotion. So they kind of have an underregulated emotion. They might have rebellious and defiant behaviors when their desires or wants are challenged by anyone. They also might have a low persistence to challenging tasks, and also might demonstrate antisocial behaviors like drug and alcohol abuse, vandalism, things like that. Understanding how variations in parenting influence child development is kind of a complicated task. and people are sometimes skeptical of generalizations in this area, because they point out that mothers and fathers may parent differently from one day to the next. So maybe one parent will be authoritarian one day and very harsh in punishment, maybe because they're having a bad day. So they're not on top of their game with their parenting, but then the next day they might be authoritative in their parenting, so that their parenting can differ from each other, or from one day to the next. And they may respond differently depending on the social context, and may treat individual children in different ways. So one, let's say, brother might be treated authoritatively, and then the daughter might be treated authoritarianly. Furthermore, research on parenting is almost entirely observational and correlational, which it renders interpretation of associations difficult and tentative. Contemporary family configurations have changed considerably from those on which much parenting research is based on, so it's unclear how well much of the classic work applies to modern parenting that's occurring presently. So there's controversy around the effect of the idea of early maternal employment on later development. Research has found that childcare quality and sensitive caregiving mediate the effects of maternal employment on attachment relationships. There was a study by Harvey conducted. It was a longitudinal study, and it involved 12,600 parents and their children who were between the ages of 3 and 12 years old. When the assessments were conducted, they had measured family income, parents' education level, mother's IQ and her age, child's race and birth order, and those things were statistically controlled in the analysis, since those variables have been associated with parental employment and child outcomes. Overall, Harvey found no evidence of substantial negative effects on early parental employment on later children's development. Early parental employment status and the timing and continuity of employment were not consistently associated with children's development. Parental job satisfaction was also not related to the effects of parental employment. So there were several small effects of early maternal employment that were found, and that was mothers who worked more hours during the child's first 3 years had children with slightly lower cognitive development through age 9, and then slightly lower academic achievement scores before the age of 7. But these effects were they were small and were not maintained past the ages indicated. Children's behavioral problems, compliance and self-esteem were not significantly affected by a mother's employment hours. The number of hours worked by fathers were not associated with children's development. Interesting differences were found for low-income families and single mothers. For single mothers, a positive relationship was found between maternal employment during the first 3 years of the child's life, and slightly higher cognitive scores among children. In low-income African American families, children whose fathers worked more hours were more likely to show improved cognitive development. This was actually the opposite for children in high-income families, though. And one can wonder what could explain the association between cognitive scores and employment hours for low-income families. Harvey does speculate that the increased income could explain this relationship in low-income and single-parent families. Television is one of the most influential medium that affects children's behavior, and almost everyone has at least one television in their house. Children watch typically an average of 2 to 4 hours of television each day, and there are different effects that television can have on children. There's effects on aggression, but at the same time, there can be effects on pro-social and positive behavior. So by the time of high school graduation, a child will have spent more time watching television than they have in the classroom. And there are actually some benefits to watching TV, depending on which types of shows a child is watching. It can be a form of entertainment. A TV can be informational, such as educational shows like PBS. And also, it can keep children company. A lot of times, parents are working or not able to watch their children, so that can be a source of company for the children. And children, they're influenced by the thousands and thousands of commercials that are seen each year, many of which are not necessarily good. Some of them are about alcohol, junk food, fast food, toys, things like that. There are some common television program themes that are not necessarily good either. That includes things like violence, sex, race and gender stereotypes, and drug and alcohol abuse. And as we learned previously, young children are impressionable. So they may assume that what they see on television is typically safe and acceptable. So when they're watching violence, they might take that as something that's acceptable. So children who watch a lot of television are generally likely to have lower grades in school. They're also likely to read fewer books because they're taking all their time watching TV. They're also more likely to exercise less and be overweight. But active parenting can ensure that children have a positive experience with television. Parents can help by viewing programs with their children, selecting developmentally appropriate shows. So most shows now have like a rating, so it's all age appropriate. Placing limits on the amount of television viewing, so maybe per day a parent will allow their child to watch 30 minutes to an hour of television, or maybe 5 hours per week or something like that. Then turning off the TV during family meals and study time. Also turning off shows that are inappropriate for the child, so things that have that violence and sex and things like that. So here are some movie suggestions related to the chapter, and again, you can find these in probably your local video rental store. You have To Kill a Mockingbird, starring Greg Peck, and it's basically a story that's based on the book, and it's told through the eyes of a young girl named Scout. And you also have a movie called My Dog Skip, starring Frankie Muniz, and that's based on the best-selling Mississippi memoir by the late Willie Morris, and the story takes place in 1942, where a shy boy is given a delightful and lovable puppy for his 9th birthday. The story, along with many wonderful adventures with Skip, is told through the boy's childhood and all the way until manhood. And here are some website suggestions related to the chapter. There's a website for the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry for children and divorce. Then we have a website about attachment in early childhood. There's a website about child abuse, a website about child development, birth order, which a lot of people find interesting. There's a website to assess your parenting styles, it looks like, and television and its effects on children, and also a website on the nature of children's play. And these are all interesting websites related to the chapter.